All right. Hello, good evening or afternoon, everyone, from wherever it is you are in the world. You have joined the Data Revolution call. Why that is will soon become apparent. My name is Eliza, and I will be moderating and joining our conversation with um, Dr. President Joyce Banda, former President of Malawi, and Washington, D.C. lobbyist Riva Levison, who will be talking to us about her book. But before we start that, can I ask that the gentleman who facilitated today's conversation, Stephen Adler at IBM, just tell us a couple of words about why he's brought us all together, and then we'll get started talking about African women in politics and in leadership. Stephen?
Well, about 2 years ago, I was working on the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. And I went to a meeting at the UN Global Compact where I met Riva Levison and was just captivated by the passion and energy that she had for helping stem the tide of Ebola in West Africa. And we became friends. But what I knew of Riva was what I saw on the outside, this incredible woman driving as a driving force in corporate America, trying to rally the troops around helping West Africa with Ebola. I really didn't know that much about Riva until I read her book. And then I discovered that my friend, who I thought I knew, had this incredible impact on the world in helping Ellen Johnson Sirleaf become the first woman president of Liberia. And as I discovered from reading the book and learning more about Riva, I began to learn more about the challenges that all women are facing in Africa becoming leaders. And I thought that this is a really important topic right now in the world that we ought to be shining a light on and talking about, because it's only through these types of conversations that we can help other women realize that they can be leaders too. So I wanted to convene this call to begin that dialogue, because I think we have 50% of the population in Africa that needs to be lifted up and told that they can be leaders, and to find the role models through conversations like this. I hope we can play a small role in helping that process. So that was why I wanted to bring you guys together. And I'm so excited that you are here and we can talk about this today.
All right, Steve, you're kind of like the embodiment of he for she, which is good, because there is definitely a role for men in women being able to take their place as half of the world's population, as half of the sky. But can I then bring in Riva, who we have you briefly introduced, to talk a bit about your book, Choosing a Hero, which is part memoir, part also the sort of recollection of President Johnson Sirleaf's journey. Riva, can you tell us a bit more about your book and the journey you went on to writing it, and the thoughts you've collected in that time?
Yeah, it would be my pleasure, Eliza and Steve. I just want to thank you for that lovely introduction. I also want to tell our audience that at the time when we were mobilizing against Ebola, Steve Adler and IBM, they didn't have a vest in these countries. He just had a passion and knew that IBM and data could help solve the problem and create a sustainable system going forward. So kudos to Steve, and thank you. It's a privilege to be on this program. So Eliza, I wrote Choosing the Hero to tell my story, and then through my story to share the remarkable life of this woman, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who would go on to be the first president, democratically elected woman on the African continent, a Nobel laureate, and then also spearhead her country as she went from war to peace, her country of Liberia. Choosing the Hero is kind of two stories. It's my story, and as Steve knows in reading the book, it's a crazy stories of me running around the continent and the world, dealing with tough issues, meeting people who did not live to fight another day, trying to make sense of it all, and looking for meaning in my life, and trying to make a contribution to a world that I really believe that leadership was the core that would lift people up. So that's part of the story. The second part of the story is the life of Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, but not who she became, but who she was. She was this woman in 1997 when I met her, that the world was lined up against her. nobody believed that a woman could go to the continent, challenge the rule of warlords, and be successful. And I think maybe she knew deep down her challenges were overwhelming, but she was driven with that mission to go and to succeed. And so I tell her story as well. I tell the story of the heart of that person, of the humanity of that person who goes and makes a decision to give of herself to her country. And so those are two of the stories, but then the story merges with President Sirleaf and myself. It talks about what we went on to do together, what I was able to do to support her, but also the meaning that she brought into my life. And so choosing the hero is my decision to follow this woman. And ultimately, it's the choice that we all make to make a difference and to find something worth fighting for.
To be able to bring us into President Banda, would you be able to tell us a little bit, Riva, about what you observed from President Johnson Sirleaf's sort of transition from a woman who wanted to make a difference to one who then was at the seat of power, and some of the challenges and, you know, she faced, so that we can then see, you know, how similar or dissimilar that was with President Banda's own journey?
No, Eliza, that's a great question. And, you know, first I'll say that nobody thought President Sirleaf could become president of Liberia. So that's really important to understand. Even at this time of history in 2005, when the men had failed her country, when warlords had destroyed the very fabric of the economy and the nature of the society, that this woman emerges and she captures the spirit of what the country could be, and nobody believed it. And I think we also have to understand why that was, because it wasn't just her own people, it wasn't just the regional African leaders, it was also the US government and the international community. So I think that's an important thing to understand. How come we couldn't get that? And the only way we could help people understand is when we did polling and convince people that this is what the people wanted. So I want to pose that question because that's important to President Banda. In switching though to leadership, I think that the challenges of being a woman doesn't change when you go into leadership. That same deep skepticism that it did not allow people to believe that this woman could emerge is also there in the area of governance. And I think that's number one. Number two, I think that in Africa, fighting for tough issues like corruption, the integrity of government, the issues that you're trying to change the culture of a society that's often been driven by rent-seeking behavior. I think women come in, and I saw President Sirleaf not just come in at the margins, but come in at the fundamental problems of society. And women leaders do that, and then they become threats to institutional interest. And I think that might be a brilliant segue for President Banda, because she has a powerful role and a powerful story.
Well, then over to you, President Banda, please. Let me not. We're really looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Yeah, this past week, I have just written an article on the Woodrow Wilson Center website. It's on front page, where I'm discussing some of these issues and some of these problems. I think for me, let me start some controversy. We must all accept that African women have always been leaders. So we are not asking for something that is new now. If you go into the history of Africa, you find that we were queens, we were emperors, we led our nations before. In the case of Malawi, there was a woman leader by the name of Namlangen who even went to war with Mozambique when they were demarcating those two countries. When I have searched, I have found that then came the Berlin Conference. In other ways, then came colonization. Then women were pushed aside. Somewhere online, I have found that they are saying that some of those that colonized our nations did not have systems in their nations for integrating women in leadership. But we were already leaders. But if you look at the 50 years, what happened is that we were pushed back. Patriarchy set in. Beliefs changed. What I am working now, I'm working on a paper that is looking at women's leadership in Africa. And I am saying, maybe we need also to look at leadership that they participated in that was hereditary. My father was a king, therefore I will become a queen. And the type of leadership now where you have to be elected. That is where the difference is. After 50 years, our brothers on the continent decided to agitate for change. Began the Nkrumahs and Kenyatta, Jomo Kenyatta, Kamuzu Banda started talking about self-rule. It is at that point that women on the continent again rose to the occasion and fought gallantly side by side with our men on the continent. So we have the Winnie Mandelas, the Graça Machaels, and people like that. That is where now the problem comes in, because now you have to be elected. Now it's democracy. We have to check now, we have to do more research, we have to collect data, we have to find out why it was easier in the past. My father is a king, then I take over that chieftainship without any problems, and people listen to me and people will obey me. And now, where I have to compete and campaign to become a leader, why is it a challenge now? What happened in 50 years to change the situation? Why is it that now I have to have money in order for people to believe in me and to choose me? So several of the challenges that I have found are: one, lack of economic empowerment, economic resources. Because in our areas, when we want to campaign for elected office, you have to have the money to mobilize the youth, the women, the chiefs, in order for you to run workshops and so on. Now, when you don't have economic resources and you're competing with this man who has, even when everybody knows in that area that you are a good leader, but you haven't been able to mobilize them and tell them your message because you don't have the capacity, you will not win. The community is deprived of a good leader, but you can't win because you don't have economic resources. In my case, I started an organization in the year 1989 called the National Association of Business Women. And to prove this, 5 of the women that were in that organization that started large businesses all ended up in politics, all ended up as cabinet ministers, including myself, ended up in State House. So there's this link between economic resources and the participation of women in politics. Number 2, it is the lack of training. Women lack appropriate training. I say appropriate because there are so many of international organizations that have come on the continent of Africa to provide training to prepare us for elected office. But sadly, most of that training is the opposite of the kind of training we should get because of our own traditions. So what we have found in the past is that we need to design our own training, tailor-made for Africa. When I go into this area, I must talk to the chief like a chief. Absolutely. I must kneel down, I must look down, but the training I have received is that be assertive, look him in the face, raise your voice, things like that, which are the opposite of what should happen in my tradition in order to get the support of this chief. So appropriate training is what is lacking, and that is one area where we need support. Not support to come and train us, but support to build the capacity to design our own training programs. Number 3 is the gender-based violence. Media coverage, negative media coverage. In Africa, they don't care about defamation. There's nowhere you can go. Your rights don't matter. You can, and I can say I'm seeing it here as well. But in Africa, it's worse. So that kind of coverage is discouraging young professionals from joining politics and standing for elected office. They don't want to be subjected to that kind of abuse. And I am glad to see that Madeleine Albright, through the No campaign, is also talking about similar issues that we are facing in Africa. So it's a global problem. But I have heard, when I had a meeting with NDI a few months ago, that right now what is lacking on that platform is data. We don't have enough data that shows how much abuse women, African women, and not only African women, women in politics are subjected. This is what NDI has found. So in Africa, we have launched what we are calling elector in office, and here NDI is also championing that issue. Number 4 is the lack of male allies. This is an effort every woman wanting to enter politics must bear in mind. At grassroots where we campaign, in most countries in Africa, 80%, 85% of the people are rural-based, and those are the voters. Here, it is it's a men's territory. Right. It's new for us as women to stand for office. It's imperative for us to have male allies. They want to see you maybe supported by the chief in the village, who is a man. You must convince the opinion leaders who are mostly men to be your allies in order for you to be seen with them, for them to be supporting you in order to convince the masses. Number 5 is the cultural and traditions. This is also an area that has not been well researched, and that's what I'm working on. But there's a lot that has to do with our beliefs and our traditions that is affecting the increasing of numbers of women in politics in Africa. Let me stop.
Fantastic. May I just ask, please, that was so informative, and I'm really glad we're recording this conversation, because I think a lot of what you've said needs to go back and be digested, really, and each thing taken in turn. But I think what people are really we're excited about, including myself with the opportunity to talk to you, is how do we learn from your personal lessons? These were the learnings, but what was your own experience like? You were the second woman to lead an African country, and you took the power in Malawi at a time when the economy was in crisis, turmoil around aid, etc. You had to show formidable leadership. I think all the women who are going to listen to this conversation would want to just know, what was that like for you? Because you're also a mother, you're also a wife. Please just give us a bit of the human experience of what it is to be a woman in leadership from your experience.
I found, and I was pleasant, and I was surprised that when I got into office, it was not about what is it that I can do to change this situation, but how is it done? What I'm trying to say is that when you come in and you suggest, I think this is what we should do, somebody will come and say, no, madam, this is not how we do it this way. And I truly believe that it's not only me, but all African leaders, all women leaders. They will want to do things right. They will not want to stay with the status quo, especially when they know that whatever they are trying to do will change things for the better for the people they serve. So in my case, what I did was to ensure that I implement programs that I knew were unpopular, but were for the best interest of Malawians. An example is devaluing the local currency, the kwacha, by 49%. My predecessor had dodged that, because that is really the best way of losing votes. Because there's no way you are going to devalue your currency by 49% without a negative impact on the poor. But that is what I needed to do. And I think, like all women, and I say this because I've had a long conversation with Madam Ellen Sirleaf on this matter. So I know how she feels, and I know that then it must be a general feeling of all women that you come into the job, and what matters to you is to serve the people that have given you the mandate in the first place. The understanding that you are in the job at their pleasure, and that for you, even if it means you getting out of State House, it doesn't matter. Even if it means you losing votes, but if at the end of the day that will improve the lives of the people, that's what you shall do. So for me, when I got into office, there was no fuel for a day in that country. There was money for 1 week, but companies were operating at 15%. The economy had grown by 1.8%, and 2 million people had no food. So for you to get in a place like that, you need the people. So number one, women leaders take risks, and I took risks. Number two, women leaders engage the people they serve. So for me, was to go back to the people, to say, I know that if I take this decision, this is what you shall go through, but this is what we need to do in order to get to a better place. And giving the simplest and the most common in the local language examples and definitions of what you're trying to do. For example, in Malaya, I would say, all of you mothers, listen to me. When your child has the malaria, a hot fever, high fever, the doctor will tell you, we must give this child an injection. An injection is painful, but you must do it because in 3 days' time, your child will be okay. That's what I'm trying to do. Stand with me. And you must be inclusive. Women leaders are inclusive. They bring everybody on board. Explaining to the people, I had to draw an economic recovery plan. For that to happen, I can't sit in my office with a few people. We had to organize a national dialogue on the economy. Everybody must say what they think, and out of that, come up with a program. Then you engage the people. Tell them, I have chosen 5 sectors. These are the reasons. And I have this period to implement this. And at the end of the day, I will have 3 projects completed in each sector. Then people have hope and have something to look forward to. So getting into office for me was to go and save the people. So if I get there, and in my mind, it is not the power that matters, but the service to the people, it's easier because I don't have to panic to keep me in power. I'll save the people. If at the end of the day, I become unpopular with other quotas and they rig the election, that's fine. Because they will rig the elections, but they will not rig the minds of the people. And leaving State House is also, it doesn't matter because there's life beyond State House.
Dr. Banda, while you have the floor, I guess, in this virtual context, I have been asking for some questions via Twitter with people using our hashtag Women Leading Africa. So I'm going to put some of the amazing questions we've had to you. From Kenya, Renee Ngamao is asking, let me read her question to you. What are the simple wins, so the case you have to make for supporting women leading Africa? So if you had to make the case for why this is important, what would you say are the reasons that people need to champion African women in leadership? Similarly, she asks you, how do we get African women to finally believe, as you've been saying, since independence, we have forgotten that we used to be leaders. So how do we get to believe in ourselves once again as being capable and deserving of leadership roles?
So the first part was
what are the wins? How do you sell to people who might need convincing the benefits of supporting women in leadership?
I have found that in countries where, like Africa, where 80% are rural-based, in some countries, 40% of the people are living under the poverty line. I have found that women leaders, when they get into leadership, they focus more on issues that affect the poor, that impact on the poor. So when you get into a country, like in my case, there was small projects that people remember now, that talk so much about now, that then my male counterparts, my male opponents kept saying when I was in office, she's wasting her time, those little things, what do they mean? But those social programs like cash transfer, a Kawa family, 1 acre fund, things that seem small, but those that affect the rural population will always matter. And I find that women pay a lot of attention to social programs like in health. Before I even appointed my cabinet, I established what I called the Presidential Initiative on Maternal Health and Safe Motherhood, because I refuse to accept that a woman can die giving life. So for me as a leader, that was more important than other sectors that would have been important to a male counterpart. For me, a woman dying is so in 24 months, we were able to build 24 holding shelters at hospitals and reduced maternal death from 675 to 460 per 100,000 live births. So that is, for me, that is what is most critical for a woman. And then, as I said earlier, we can convince everybody because the data is there for anybody to see. The stories are there for anybody to hear, that when we get into leadership, we are risk takers. We are risk takers for example, in Malawi, I can demonstrate, President Sirleaf can demonstrate that war went on and on and on. It took a woman to sit down and say, this can stop. Women leaders love peace. Women leaders believe in inclusivity. Women leaders believe in contact and dialogue. And yeah, so in my case, it is the same. You can get into Malawi and they will show you evidence that when she came, she focused more on things that matter and on inclusivity, including in decision making or in matters of state, of the opposition, civil society, faith community, inviting them to State House, sit at a table and say, for example, when I was fighting corruption and I had to arrest 72 people, for the first time, that kind of fight against corruption of that magnitude, with all of them fighting me back, I had to get the opposition, the faith community, the civil society around the table to say, this is the problem we have. We need to tackle it. And I'm prepared to put my neck on line, but I need you and me to be on board. That is another uniqueness of a woman being a leader, because most men will want, because the power is centralized, it's with them. They don't see why they should invite anybody else to a round table to discuss matters like this.
And to the second question about, let me just recap what the question was. Let us see what she asked here. I think she was asking about, let me see, I'm just trying to look on Twitter very quickly, about self-belief. We have lost that self-belief because we have been out of decision-making and out of, without power for so long. How did you yourself, where do you get your self-belief from to be able to take the risks that you say women leaders are more willing to take?
My view is that African women are very brave, and African women believe in themselves, and African women are confident. What is going on is not their lack of belief in themselves. What is going on is what we talked about earlier, the abuse, the scandalization, the media coverage, what Madeleine Albright is talking about and what I am talking about. That is what is the problem. Most women are saying they don't want to participate in political leadership in public office anymore. If the route they have to take is to be scandalized in front of their families and their children, they would rather stay in their professions. That not only affects the numbers of women interested with confidence to stand for office, but also affects the quality. Because a medical doctor, an engineer, somebody who wanted to divert to go into politics would say, no, I'm better off in my profession than to divert to get into public office so that I can be abused this way. Yes. The sad bit is that it's not men mostly that scandalize or abuse fellow women. It is women abusing fellow women as well.
Yes. Yes.
Riva. Riva.
Yes.
I wanted to make an intervention. Let me turn this briefly. Not to the Twitter question, but just to something that President Banda said, and also the main theme that runs through choosing the hero, because I tell you that I don't focus on the triumphs. I focus on the struggle, because the struggle's not just the struggle of Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, but really it's the struggle of anyone who's trying to fight for what they believe, and particularly for women. So I walk through the struggle in '97 to return home and fight against warlords when the international community wrote her off and her own political party dispensed with her because she was too much of a threat. So I walk through what a woman challenging those type of institutional beliefs in country, in region, in the international community. And then even when peace took place and there was an opportunity for an interim government, and President Sirleaf came back and put herself in that same type of space. There was no war, but you still had the same players, the fighting players, the parties, the international community. Even within that context, she still represented a threat when all of those pieces were in play. It was only in 2005 when there was a level playing field and that the parties did not have resources that they had put in place through incumbency, that she was able to get on that level playing field, speak directly with the people, change the dynamic, use the communication with people through polling, understand that she was able to emerge. But all of those issues of disbelief in women's success didn't, nobody understood what she could do until she did it. So I just wanted to say that, and why I say that, because I want to go to the thing that both myself and President Sirleaf and President Banda have in common is that women African leaders can't do it on their own. And I think President Banda, we've spoken about that. You'll see in the book my story of being able to fight for President Sirleaf for almost 2 decades and to give her voice and to give her possibilities of voice here in the US, because her voice was not being heard above the clutter of what was being said on the continent, of the media that President Banda talked about that was so abusive and was pay for play. And so people like myself, we didn't make this person succeed, but we provided the support that gave them the lift, the lifting up that was able to succeed. And even in President Banda's current situation here, she's a distinguished fellow, not only at the Center for Global Development, we're sitting with her lovely assistant, but also at the Wilson Center. I mean, that type of global platform for somebody like President Banda to be able to be lifted up above the vitriol of the local press and being able to be an aspirational leader for women, that doesn't come accidentally. Do you know? Yeah. It's an effort of people recognizing that this is somebody who's contributed so much to her country and to the continent, and at a time when cynicism is so deep and when institutional corruption prevents the emergence, whether it's a woman or a man, of leaders that can come up and claim the mantle of the people. People like us need to help. And so one of the things that we have to take a look at from an international community, I mean, it's great to like have these slogans and make women count and elect them into office, but they're real barriers. You know, they're real barriers at every level of entry. And the truth is, and I would say that President Sirleaf didn't succeed in '97 because Charles Taylor was a brutal warlord. She had no real chance. In 2003, when she was wanted to become the interim leader, she didn't succeed because they didn't want to be accountable to her way of governance and openness and transparency. And all of those issues are still there. So, you know, we have to take a look at that. But again, it just goes to people, not just on the continent, the women in the developed world, to really look at the solutions. I think President Banda also said we have to start changing our thinking. You can't go and say, I'm going to train you this way when training is against the cultural beliefs of the tribal chiefs. And so we don't really have all the answers either, but this type of collaborative dialogue that Steve Adler has put on the table is just a remarkable opportunity. And Eliza, too, the platform that you're looking to put in place to tell people's stories. I mean, it is through storytelling that people's hearts are touched and their minds are changed. And
Yes.
so, I think that, this, hopefully this is the beginning. And I did want to do, because Steve said I could, I do want to do a shout out for the book and how people can get it, because I think also President Banda was one of my first readers. Yep. Yeah. She was one of my first readers, and she can tell you about, shaking your head through the whole book, because it's not, the only way you can tell a story and connect with people is to show not only my humanity and my flaws, but also Ellen Johnson Sirleaf's flaws as well, because nobody's perfect, and by seeing all of the mistakes we made and letting people know we're human and we are just trying to figure things out, that people come along on the journey. So there's no pontification or telling people what to think. It's just letting the story tell itself. And then I just say to you, Eliza, that's why I also have a lot of a lot of happiness that you're looking to put such a platform together. And maybe I think President Banda has a remarkable story to tell as well.
Absolutely.
I want to do one thing. I just want to show you the book. See, this is the book, and it's available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and just wanted to share that. And I'm going to turn it back to President.
No, Riva, can I ask you a question while you've got, if you don't mind, because you've said some really phenomenal things there, and I think some of them just need to be sort of developed a little bit more. Two things. One is book related, and the other is when you just said that it was really important to see people's humanity. And the challenge with anyone in leadership, especially in this sort of digital connected age, is to be very careful about your image, so that, in the end, what you have is something that mitigates against negative press, but also doesn't feel very authentic, right? And often, unfairly so, women are often accused, as you can see with Hillary Clinton at the moment now, of not being authentic. How do we, and you've learned this from writing your book, how do you present yourself as authentic and as real and as human, but in a way that doesn't allow people to undermine you and diminish your contribution?
Yeah. I think, Eliza, and I would love President Banda to respond to this question as well. But I think, people are really shrewd, and people can tell when you're being true and true to yourself. And so one of the things that people have asked me before, for example, Hillary Clinton, what advice, given everything that I got from working with President Sirleaf, would I give to Hillary Clinton? And, my comment to them was to follow your heart and to not fear being understood, because I'm just going to go to currency and then go back to the book. Is we can all relate to what Hillary Clinton was going through. I mean, if you've read my book, and Steve and President Banda know this scene intensely, I'm about to convoy into Baghdad, and I have this horrible bacterial infection in my stomach, and I am just like puking every hour, the whole convoy in. But I went anyway. And I went because, and I say it in the book, because I'm with these Rambo-like men, and I don't want them to think that I'm like weak and I can't do it, or that I'm afraid. And also because I, at the time, wanted to push myself to the limit and to be part of this experience. And so Hillary Clinton just made a fundamental tactical miscalculation, because we could have all related to that. All of us women, I mean, any of us who are mothers, we have bronchitis, and we just pretend we're totally fine because we're taking care of our kids and our family. He was just pushing it to the limit. My goodness, just say that. Everyone said, hey, lady, take a break. You're doing this for us. But she didn't. She tried to hide it. And then that goes back to what President Sirleaf said to me, which is just, don't fear. If you follow your heart and you don't fear being misunderstood, people will recognize that. And so I think, I think that I'll turn it over to President Banda, but I think that that was, something that I took away, why I think the book works for those who have read it, because again, I'm shot at the book, I throw up, I completely doubt myself, but I'm honest. And I'm honest, and people know if I'm willing to reveal that much about myself, that what I say about my beliefs and my commitment and why I do certain things, well, that must be true. If I'm willing to expose myself that way. And I just think, this campaign is perverse in how it's trying to understand the American public. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to President Banda.
Allow me to stay away from America.
It's probably for the best.
Okay.
I believe that in Africa you don't even have a choice. No matter what you do, you shall be misunderstood and scandalized by a certain group. You have to have thick skin. I have had an assassination attempt on my life. So when you have made a decision that I'm going to go ahead and save my people, they must be prepared for that negative stuff every day. When you are fighting corruption, the people you are fighting are very powerful people, and they warn you, we shall either kill you or smear this back onto you. What you do is hope that the people that I serve have built enough trust and confidence in me that whatever is thrown out there, they will give me the benefit of the doubt. And so that's where I'm coming from. That's what I've done all my life. You look at stuff that is written. My daughter was going to Malawi College of Medicine in Malawi, and every morning when she was going to college, there was a place where they were selling newspapers. She told me that every time she passed there, she went like this. Because it would be Joyce Banda this, Joyce Banda that, Joyce Banda the next, especially in a country where you have decided to allow for press freedom, because you believe that a free nation, free minds, free people will operate better and in the end prosper the nation. So you don't want to go arresting people or stop people from talking anything, including about you. So that's what I did, and we were on the global index. We were at position 145. In the period that I was president, we reduced that down to 79 position. So it was phenomenal in 2 years to reduce that, because everybody was free to write anything, to say anything. And I also went ahead and repealed laws that I think were negative, that were passed by the previous regime in order to control the people. For example, a minister legally who had the power to ban a newspaper or to close down a media house if they singularly on his own, if he wasn't happy about what they're publishing. I repealed laws like that. So at the end of the day, it's for you to just, as Riva says, to go ahead and stay with what you believe in, proceed and stay the course for the sake of the people that you serve. But I thought that I should not forget to say this. I hope you know, Eliza, that women's leadership is under attack right now, more than ever before. 20 years after Beijing, we thought we had made progress, but I want you to look at what happened in Australia, Thailand, Philippines, Myanmar, Zimbabwe, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, and even what is happening here in America. I don't want to go into all that because I'll take a long time. But if you go into all those places where women are leaders or have served as leaders, you will see what has happened. And then let's start another conversation from there. But those are the challenges women leaders are facing. We made progress, but it looks like we're going backwards now.
Hey, Eliza, let me say one more thing, and maybe Joyce will allow me to, President Banda will allow me to share that, because with everything that we were both saying with the, talking about following your heart, etc., I just go back to the point of support. And I remember meeting with President Banda late last year, or like maybe just about a year ago, you know, because it's a difficult thing to take the incessant attacks by media and the distortions and not have them affect who you are when you're on your own without support. And one of the things that President Banda said to me, if I may share it, can I share it?
Yes, of
okay,
course.
Thank you. Share it. And I think it's also a takeaway for all of us, is that President Banda went into office just like Madam President did, Madam President Sirleaf, and just, you know, driven by passion to do the right things, and thought that was enough, but it wasn't enough. And it wasn't enough because you have to protect yourself against everything else that's going to come your way, and all of the people and the institutional interests that are going to be threatened. And what President Banda said to me is that I will always regret making that decision, or not making the decision to protect myself from this level of attacks, when I thought my intent and my good work would be sufficient protection in itself, and it's not. And we talked a lot about that. I think I even wrote that somewhere because I thought it was such a open moment, but so true, because you know, we as development people, we as people who come in want to support people like President Banda, like President Sirleaf, like other women who are going to be in leadership's position. What we don't recognize is you just can't put in that water well, or you just can't build that school. You have to recognize that without being able to support perceptions and create an environment where people are vested in honest leadership and democratic institutions, that well is going to be in disrepair. And so we've talked a lot, President Banda and I, and also President Sirleaf and I, about the importance of trying to get information out that's not corrupted by a pay-for-play type of media. And platforms like this, again, I'm going to put responsibility on you, Eliza, and platforms that you're looking at are really important. But even our development institutions have to understand that communication is as important to presidential security, democratic security, human rights, as the military or the police or other issues like that. And particularly so with the disadvantage that women have, because women threaten institutional interest. And they will continue to do that in Brazil, in the United States, in Zimbabwe, in Myanmar, in Chile, in Malawi, in Liberia.
The time has flown by, and we have just 10 minutes left. And I wondered if I could put one final question to you both. I've been listening as I sort of do the Nizinga effect to African women and women from the African diaspora, including African American women, talking about leadership. And one woman said that the one thing that, the two things that hold a woman back is fear and fatigue. What would both of you do if you were never afraid and weren't, and didn't get tired? So what do you still want to do that you would do if you didn't have to fight fear or fatigue?
I think in my case is to ensure that I mobilize as many women as possible to hand over the mantle to take over from us. As many women on the continent as possible. What is necessary right now is for us to mobilize ourselves and to be a huge network. Because even if we are going to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, it's going to be, in our case in Africa, changing of mindsets. And even for that, we need role models, we need mentors, we need women networks for massive civic education. So if I was as tired, as you rightly say, what I would do, spend whatever remains of my life doing is encouraging and supporting as many women as possible to enter politics and leadership.
Thank you. What about you, Riva?
So I'm gonna offer it from my perspective, which was somebody who's been supportive to people like President Sirleaf and to President Banda. And I wanted to share when we launched the book, Choosing the Hero at Politics and Prose, and President Sirleaf was asked that very question, Eliza. One of the things that she said is the importance of connectivity and networking and networks of women, not only in the country, but internationally and globally, and how important that was for her and her ability to succeed and to sustain the type of governance that she wanted to put in place. And I consider myself one of those people in that privileged network. And I think we started the conversation on the fight against Ebola, which could have been a global contagion, and it was shut down. And I would say to you as well that in that instant, Madam President made, she begged, she pleaded, she used every single contact she had to be able to get the world to pay attention. And so it's not just the global group of women, but also the importance of those networks and women not feeling isolated, because fear and fatigue is when you're isolated. And then the only other thing I would say, and we have to remember this, it's totally about resources. At the end of the day, it's about resources. And there is a huge resource deficit for women politicians because they're not easily bought and sold. And so we have to, many men aren't as well, but I'm just speaking for the camaraderie of the people here. And that's also something that has to be dealt with.
I thought that maybe as you wind up, I think it will be very important for me to put this on record. It will be very, very important as we move forward to ensure that as we mobilize ourselves in Africa and form those networks and form those grassroots organizations and focus on issues that affect us, to forge smart partnerships with our friends across from the West, the international community. I always worry about international organizations coming on the continent of Africa and thinking they can solve our problems and doing it alone. When we have leadership there, we're not just fighting there, and we're not just sitting there waiting for handouts. We are working and we are mobilizing ourselves. But forging smart partnerships have proven beyond any reasonable doubt, even in the case of Riva and President Sirleaf, about how much you can yield if you work together. She could have decided to go on the continent of Africa, start projects and initiatives because she wants to make a name for herself or to prove anything. But to go on the continent of Africa and identify a hero, and identify a friend, and identify a fellow leader, and work together for the benefit of Africa, because we know what to do. We have articulated our issues very well. We just need partnership, and we just want to work together with those that can help us achieve what we want to achieve.
That is a fantastic note to end on. Just to say that actually, that becomes possible when people no longer look at African women just as victims. You can only seek to forge a partnership with someone you see as a partner. So we need better stories and better visibility for African women so that people can recognize that we are already taking the mantle for leadership and are now just looking for people to help build a bridge for us, whether it's to resources or to advocates or to partners and friends. So thank you for all your wisdom, and I hope that in part the Nizinga effect can help raise that visibility for African women. Thank you too to Steve for making this all happen, for being the bridge so that the three of us can connect. I think I can, Steve, unless you want to say something to wrap up, I would just say thank you again and Amandla.
Thank you.
Well, I only want to say that, I found this conversation really fascinating. I loved it. And I think, looking back at the book that you wrote, Riva, called Choosing the Hero, I think that the three of you, I think that what President Banda said was that there are leaders in Africa, women leaders in Africa now. There are heroes all across the continent, and they need partners. And I would encourage the three of you to think together about how you can be the partners, how we can build a partnership network in the West and in Africa to help support women in Africa, the leaders that are already there, that just need a lift up, that just need a partner to talk through issues, someone who can support them when they're fearful, when they have the fatigue, when they don't know if they can go forward, who can help them work through all those issues. It's not just about the stories, it's also about the partnership, choosing the right partners. And I think what we've discussed today, I hope we can find a way of building that partnership network, because I think that would be a fantastic outcome.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Thank you very much, Steve, for giving us this opportunity.
My pleasure. Thank you all. It's been a great
All right.
Yeah, it was great.
All right then. Bye everyone. Thank you.
Bye, Liza.
Bye.
Bye.